Are you motivated or are you dedicated? Motivation is highly overrated. In many cases, emotions are what motivates us. And how many of y'all know our emotions can be fickle, just like our feelings? And we can feel like it in 1 minute, and the next minute, we're totally against it. Dedication, however, is a commitment. And if we're going to have atomic habits, we need more motivation. Welcome to tonight's Transformational Tuesdays with Tasha. I'm your host, Tasha M. Scott, and I'm the owner of Maximize Growth LLC, a training and development company right here in Montgomery, Alabama. We help leaders and teams to become more self aware so that they can maximize their potential professionally and personally. We also help to improve communication strategies as well as team unity and personal development. And for the past few weeks here on Transformational Tuesdays with Tasha, we've been discussing the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And we've been going through this book one chapter at a time. And I want to thank every one of y'all who have been on here with me, tuned in live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I personally love engaging with you all throughout the conversation, and I love what you bring to the table. And in fact, Matt, I'm going to check here to see if there's anybody tuned in with us. Y'all know the drill. If you normally tune in with me, let me know that you're with me in the chat. And I'm excited about this conversation, just like all the rest of them. So just a quick review here. In this book, Atomic Habits, James Clear has been talking about the laws of behavior change. And the first law that he mentioned was make it obvious. And I love this because he said, if we're going to develop new habits or break unhealthy habits, we have to first make that habit obvious. We can't afford to go into avoidance mode. And when I say make it obvious, we have to make it obvious to ourselves. Because how many of y'all know we can fool some of the people most of the time, but when we expose things to ourselves, it's pretty hard to act like we don't know anymore, correct? And so again, tonight we're going to dig deeper into this first section on the laws of behavior change. And we're going to talk about something else, and that is motivation is overrated. Let me check in and make sure. Hi, Sandra from South Carolina. Thank you for tuning in with me tonight. And you know, like I always say, I love your engagement. Tonight, like I mentioned, we're talking about motivation is overrated. And I'm going to start sharing one of the stories from the book. He mentioned in here Ann Thorndike. She's a primary care physician at Massachusetts General Hospital. She had this crazy idea to improve the eating habits of hospital staff and visitors without changing their willpower or motivation in the slightest way. And here's the thing, she didn't plan on saying anything to them at all. What she decided to do with her colleagues is they created this 6-month study, and they wanted to basically alter the architecture of the hospital cafeteria. And here's a couple of the changes that they made. One, they changed how drinks were arranged in the room. And then they took water and added it at every cash register. And then they placed baskets of water next to food stations throughout the whole cafeteria. Soda was still primarily in the refrigerators, but they made sure that water was visible in more than one location. And here's the result of them changing the environment. Soda sales in the hospital dropped by 11.4%. Sales of bottled water increased by 25.8%. And they made similar adjustments with the food as well, where they had healthy food more visible than they had the junk food. And remember, y'all, they didn't say anything to anyone. The only thing that they did was they changed the environment. And what's the point? Your habits change depending on the room that you're in and the cues that are in front of you. We talked earlier in our other sessions about how we have to declare who we want to be, right? And in this whole make it obvious, I love that they included, we have to change our environment too. Environment is basically the invisible hand that shapes our human behavior. And he said, when we're trying to change habits, break old habits and create new healthy habits, he said the most common form of change, it's not always internal. He said it's external. And he said we're changed by the world around us. Every habit is context dependent. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment. And think about that. Is there, for yourself, is there any one of you who maybe you've tried to create new habits, you've tried to break old habits, and you've seen for yourself how this actually is true? That we're products of our environment. When we want to grow, we want to change, we want to improve for the better, we cannot exclude our environment in that. I'll tell you some of the changes that I made that I didn't even realize what I was doing and how true this really was. But when I started taking vitamins, instead of having my vitamins in the cabinet, I decided to move them out of the cabinet, and I have a strategic place that I place them on my counter so that every time I go into the kitchen in the morning time, those vitamins are visible. So now it triggers my brain to say, okay, take your vitamins. And so it's a habit now, right? Another habit that I created, actually didn't even realize what I was doing, was I have a Peloton, and I used to have the Peloton in my bedroom, but I moved it out of my bedroom and created my own workout room in my house. And so in doing that, my environment now, where my bedroom is my bedroom, but now I have a specific place and space to go in my house to go work out on purpose. It has a dedicated space. And I've been able to create healthy habits around that. And then here in my office, I'm able to have a separate space where I'm able to go and do my work, do my business. So when I leave this room, I can relax in other parts of the house. These small changes have helped me to support habits, to support healthy habits. And again, what about you? Is there anything for you that you've noticed that because of your environment, maybe you walk into a room and you don't feel as enthused anymore? Sometimes it's about switching things up so that, again, everything around you has to support the habits and the person that you're trying to become. And even if you say, well, Tasha, I only have a small space, I don't have a whole lot of space to work with, one of the things that he suggests is, instead of saying, well, I guess I can't participate in that, he said assign areas in your space. No matter how small your space is, he said you can assign areas. So one area is for relaxing, one area is for maybe your think tank, where you do your work. Another area may be where you entertain, another area may be where you work out, whatever that looks like. He says assign areas of your house, assign areas to where now you can compartmentalize. And here's another suggestion. He said maybe it's not even about the house itself. Maybe it's getting out of the house. Maybe you need to, maybe working out at home is not your thing, right? So maybe you might need to go to a gym or go somewhere else. Environment. Or maybe you should, if you want to meet with someone, instead of them coming to your home or your office, maybe go to a coffee shop. Or if you're a small business owner and you want to get out of the house, they have co-working spaces now. Again, environment is one of the things that once we have the right environment, it will support our habits. And so many times we focus on motivation alone. We think, oh, I'm not motivated, I'm not inspired, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this. And I'm just giving you some things to think about. Maybe it's time to reimagine your environment, because maybe that is the missing piece for you, whatever that thing looks like. And remember, when we first started, if you've been on this journey with me, we talked about, who do you want to become? And when you make a decision about who you want to become, your habits have to now support that decision. And what he's talking about in this chapter is, when your habits make that decision, it's because your internal and your external are now supporting that decision. And he says here some more stuff from chapter 6 in the book. He said, the truth is that many of the actions that we take each day are shaped not by purposeful drive and choice, but by the most obvious option. And it's the same scenario, like I told you with my vitamins. Because they're visible, now it's easier for me to continue or commit to the habit of taking them every single day versus out of sight, out of mind. And he says that in our humanness, we perceive through our sensory nervous system. And he said we perceive the world through sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. But we also have other ways of sensing stimuli. Some are conscious and some are not unconscious. But Mr. Clear says in this chapter, he says the most powerful of all of our human sensory abilities is vision, which is why this law of behavior change make it obvious. He's literally saying put in front of you, create the environment. You don't have to be a victim of your environment. He said you can be the architect of your environment. So again, we talked about eliminating excuses last time. This is another way to eliminate excuses, is to really look at every area, every aspect of our life. Yes, our thoughts are important. They are extremely important, but so is our external environment. I'm going to stop here and see. Sandra, I love what you're saying here. She says, when my office gets cluttered, I lose track of my days. Once I stop and straighten my desk and do my filing, it's easier to stay on task. And she also says, I did my workout routine at home for a while, but it fell apart. I went back to the gym, and the space and interactions with others feed my fitness habit. Exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the things that we have to know and be self-aware about ourselves. And using Sandra's example, she said, I know myself. If I'm at home, it's not going to get done. And so she could beat herself up and say, oh, I'm not motivated. I'm not motivated. And we can use that as an excuse. It's not about the motivation, y'all. It's about being intentional. And I love that you said that, Sandra. So he says here, again, you don't have to be a victim of your environment. You literally get to be the architect of it. And y'all, do you realize how powerful we really are? Do you realize that we have choices? We have things that are within our control. Yes, there are some things outside of our control. I get it. But there's a lot that's within our control. And so, again, if you've been wondering why you haven't been motivated, if you've been wondering why you've been procrastinating on some things, you have the right goals, you have the right intentions, consider your environment. Consider that, where you live, where you work, consider that there might be some slight adjustments that need to be made so that you can make it more obvious and have the kind of life that supports the habits that your habits will support the kind of life that you desire. And I love here how he talks about how do you design an environment for success. Because at the end of the day, it's one thing to know something, but it's another thing to do something. And he says every habit is initiated by a cue, and we're most likely to notice cues that stand out, which is why we have to be visible. Things have to be visible. And he said when the cues are subtle and hidden, they're easier to ignore. So again, analyze your surroundings and ask yourself, you know, like Sandra used the analogy of clutter. Is the clutter feeding my habits, or is it supporting my toxic habits or my unhealthy habits? And he gave some more examples about how you can redesign your space and make your cues more obvious. He used the example about the medication, like I use about my vitamins. He said you could probably take your pill bottle out and maybe set it next to your bathroom counter or set it wherever you are. If you're somebody who is trying to practice an instrument or improve in an area, he said, place that thing, whether it's a guitar, piano, whatever that thing is, place it somewhere obvious that you're going to see it every single day. If you're someone who wants to send more thank you notes, keep a stack of stationery on your desk. In other words, don't hide the thing that you say, I want to improve in this area. Make it more obvious for you. Here's a big one. If you want to drink water, fill up a few water bottles. Like I showed y'all my jug that I use, or maybe you have something. keep it in front of you, or maybe place different ones. Now, don't do like I did. I had water bottles all over the house and I didn't drink them, which is why I got my big jug. But do whatever is going to work for you to make it obvious. And therefore, it's not one of those things that, oh, I forgot about this, or I forgot about that. Make it obvious. Here's something that I do as well. I keep journals. This is my journal for February. This is the last day of February. So tomorrow I start a new journal, and I've actually even labeled my journals, y'all. But one of the things that I love to do every day is I literally do a brain dump. I get everything out of my head. I'm a list kind of person. So I get everything out of my head concerning my business, concerning my personal life, and I'll do checklists. And the goal is not to finish the whole list in one day. The goal is to just keep it before me, the things that I have to do. Some of those things on that list may need to be delegated, true, but at least I'm having it in front of me. And so this is a way that I'm keeping things visible so that I can support healthy habits of who I'm trying to become, the person that I desire to be. And I love, he says here, you don't have to be a victim of your environment, but you can also be the designer of your world and not merely a consumer of it. The only time we're stuck, y'all, is if we don't have choices. That's the only time that we're stuck, is we don't have choices. But I'm crazy enough to believe that probably 99.9% of the time we have a choice. And when it comes to our life, we can be intentional about the choices that we're making. And he talks even more about, here's one that really stepped on my toes. He talked about the phone. He says, and I put in my notes, we're all guilty of this. A lot of times we say, I want to be more productive. I don't have enough time. But what is it that we're always doing on our phones, y'all? Somebody just type in for me, so I'm not the only one. What is it that we're mostly doing on our phone, y'all? And I know I'm probably stepping on some toes over here because y'all are probably watching me on your phone right now. But one of the things that we have to learn how to do is, again, on purpose, make sure that we're positioning ourselves for success. And so if we say, I want to be more productive, then we can't spend all of our time browsing social media. We can't spend all of our time just getting lost on the phone if we want to have healthy habits, right? And so this is something that he says it may be where I love the analogy that he said. He said he uses his phone for one thing, he uses his tablet for another thing, and he uses his computer for another thing. So therefore, he's not self-sabotaging, and he's literally able to stay in that productive zone. And I was talking to someone today, and I love the discipline that we were having a meeting, and she said the same thing. She said, you know what? I don't check for her, it's LinkedIn. She said, I don't check my LinkedIn until these hours here. And she said, this is what helps me to stay productive. And this is all about environment, right? And this is about setting ourselves up so that we can have the right habits, the right behaviors to be successful. And he says, if you want behaviors that are stable and predictable, you need an environment that is stable and predictable. And we have to look at every aspect of our lives, y'all. And again, as I'm reading this book, this is helping me too. This is helping me to see, where am I missing it? Where have I self-sabotaged? Where have my habits not supported the person that I'm desiring to become? And again, I'm going to read this again. He says, a stable environment. If you want behaviors that are stable and predictable, you need an environment that is stable and predictable. A stable environment where everything has a place and a purpose is an environment where habits can easily form. That's the purpose of us evaluating where we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it. And just in summary, this chapter, just to recap what he's talking about, he says small changes in context can lead to large changes in behavior over time. He said every habit is initiated by a cue. So remember the example that or the story that I shared with the hospital cafeteria. When they put the water up front, and made it more visible, guess what? People consumed more water. When they put the healthy foods up front, people consume. So what we have to do is we have to notice the cues, be intentional about placing our cues, making things more visible, and making good habits obvious in our environment. And he said, gradually our habits will become not, he said, become associated not just with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding our behavior. And it's easier, this is the last point, summary in this chapter. He said it's easier to build new habits in a new environment because you are not fighting against old cues. Now, a new environment doesn't mean that you have to up and move. A new environment can be an environment that you create. Remember, once you understand, and again, I'm gonna go back to the example that Sandra used. She said about her workout. She said she decided, you know what? I cannot work out at home. I have to go to the gym. So that was a new environment. But then in another sense, she said when her office was cluttered, she had to clean it up. That represented a new environment. Do y'all see what I'm saying? So, hi, Miss Deborah Weaver. Thank you for being on here. Hey, Mila. Mila says here, she says, I know what I am going to do this weekend. She says, I'm going to replace the cookies on my kitchen counter with healthier snack choices, out of sight, out of mind. Thank you for the new perception. High five, Mila. That's it right there. It's all about being intentional and making things more obvious. Here's the thing, the things that we want to support our healthy habits, making those things more obvious. Sandra says here, this is good. She says, I don't have email on my phone to cut back on reasons for me to be drawn there. I need to take cues from you, Sandra, because that's probably one of my downfalls is I'm guilty of sitting here with this when I know I have stuff to do. I know I should be working on deadlines, working on speaking engagements, and I can get lost in that phone for sure. Anybody else guilty like that? So this book is helping me too. I'm not sitting here saying I've arrived. We're having a conversation here. And so that's one of the reasons why I chose this book is because it really does speak to who we want to become. It speaks to our identity. So these are good things that y'all are saying. So if here's the last thing, if you found this beneficial, I would love for you to, if you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, to like this, to share it and subscribe. Will you help me spread the positivity? Will you help me to spread this wisdom? One of the things that I have vowed is I will never sell anything on here. I'm coming to pour value, and we're literally going on this journey of transformation together. If you have ever missed an episode, you can visit my website, maximizegrowthllc.com, in the section called video blogs, and you can catch all of the replays for sure. And I just want to thank y'all so much for being a part of this journey, being on this journey of transformation with me. And we are going to conquer our worlds one habit at a time. Thank you again. And I will be back next Tuesday for the next session of Atomic Habits. Thank y'all so much. Have a great evening.